Hello and welcome to the big picture. As the year 2014 comes to an end, we will be looking at various areas and discuss how the country has done in those specific areas. Today we'll be looking at India's foreign policy. 2014 has been a year of dramatic developments with a major shift in the political scene. This has also resulted in a new vigor and approach towards foreign policy. Probably no other Indian Prime Minister has participated in so many high-powered multilateral and bilateral summits as Narendra Modi has done in his first 6 months in office. The engagement with all the major world powers and also with neighbors has been the hallmark. During this year, we saw two governments with former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who also had laid great emphasis on foreign policy, giving way to Modi. We will look at how this transition has taken place and what kind of policy changes have happened and what augurs for the coming year. To discuss this, I have with me a panel of eminent experts: Vivek, Katju, former ambassador and foreign policy analyst; Professor S.D. Muni, distinguished fellow at IDSA and a former professor at JNU; Professor A.K. Pasha, former director Gulf Studies program at the JNU and now a professor there; and Siddarth Varadarajan, senior journalist and former editor of the Hindu. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Katju, what did Manmohan Singh leave behind as far as foreign policy is concerned?
Well, the last thing he left behind was lethargy. Just as in other areas, so in foreign policy, things had appeared to be fraying. And I wondered whether the important powers of the world were taking India seriously. It was a natural thing because it was a government on the ropes. And I think most people expected the Congress to go. So it was only a question of time. They were looking as to who would replace him. With Mr. Modi's coming...
We will come to Modi's coming.
Okay.
Professor Muni, would you agree with him?
Partly, yes. I think there were areas where lethargy was quite explicit, like the neighborhood, for instance, where basically the policy structure of Manmohan Singh has remained. And I think Mr. Modi has in public endorsed that we are actually continuing on with this policy with the great powers. So far as Look East is concerned, the change of the name, etc., we can discuss in details. But and towards the neighbors, the idea of Manmohan Singh government was also to cultivate the neighbors.
Right.
But it got derailed, as Ambassador Vivek Katju says, in terms of implementing them, in terms of action. And I mean, it's quite puzzling to many of us why it is that the kind of frequency with which Dr. Manmohan Singh visited other countries and interacted with other leaders, why he did not interact with the neighboring countries, except maybe Bangladesh or whatever. Okay.
Professor Pasha, would you also take the same line, or you think that there has been some... Did Dr. Manmohan Singh, achieve anything at all in this year, in the first 6 months that 5 months that he was there?
Yes, I think there were fairly credible achievements as far as West Asia and North Africa was concerned. This area has been in turmoil, from Tunisia to Iran, Turkey to Sudan. Manmohan Singh was able to maintain a balanced relationship between the Turks, the Iranians, Israelis, and most of the Arab countries. And he was able to safeguard the core interests of energy security, the welfare of our workers there, food security, trade, investments, and broader areas of security and stability in this area, despite upheavals which were largely due to foreign interventions and extremist elements trying to overthrow regimes, so on and so forth. So I think, in a nutshell, he laid the foundations of the policy which the present government is continuing.
Okay, Siddarth, how do you look at this? It's interesting what Professor Pasha says. And if you see, we'll come to what is happening now, but that's a very important point.
See, if you take a long-term view, if you review the 10 years of the Manmohan Singh premiership, because it's, I think, unfair to judge foreign policy performance the last 5 months, right? I think he's set a course in terms of recalibration of reconfiguration of India's relations with the big powers. He set a certain direction with the US and then when that had adverse consequences for the relationship with China, in his second term, he devoted some attention to repairing the relationship with China. Deepening the economic and strategic content of ties with Japan is another contribution that Dr. Manmohan Singh made. But I think the single largest weakness or failing of the former Prime Minister was, as Professor Muni says, the neighborhood. I think it's, the failure to, apart from the failure to visit all neighbors. But there
engage them also.
Lack of engagement, lack of being able to deliver on promises made, for example, to Bangladesh. I think that there was, on Afghanistan, on the other hand, I think very successful policy. But the immediate neighborhood of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, I think that his failure to personally involve himself and to lead from the front and to emphasize that this is a single most important set of relations for India, I think that was one weakness or one failing of the Manmohan Singh foreign policy agenda.
Okay. So Katju, now coming back to, okay, we now have what went wrong and what was wrong. But as Siddarth was talking about and Professor Muni, so that was the first priority of Mr. Modi, to engage with the neighbors, for his swearing-in ceremony, inviting all these neighbors. Was that a very deliberate step, knowing fully well how the neighbors must have been fed?
No, I think that was a deliberate step, but if you take the last 6 months as a whole, there is a new energy and there is a new vigor which has been imparted to foreign policy making. And that is significant. If I use the word lethargic, in the last, we are reviewing 2014.
Right.
In the first 6 months or the first 5 months, there was complete lethargy. That's been replaced with vigor.
Right.
And with engagement, in particular with the neighborhood.
Right.
So that's a clear difference. I think the stage is now being set. He's met all the world leaders and the stage has been set for achievement. And we've got to really see that all that now is promised, will it be translated into actual achievement on the ground in terms of promotion, safeguarding and promotion of our national interests?
Right. So, Professor Muni, when Modi set out on this unprecedented kind of foreign policy initiatives which he took, the kind of traveling he has done in the last 6 months, you think that, would you look at it as something which was necessary, or you think that he has overplayed his role? Some people feel that he need not have been so overactive on that front in such a short period.
No, I wouldn't say that. But to begin with, the last, this is also unfair to judge Manmohan Singh for the last 5 months lethargy, because this was election time.
Yeah.
Even
the previous year we had seen the kind of...
and all foreign capitals were, looking with their fingers crossed as to what happens, what does not happen.
They knew clearly that this government is going out.
They knew.
No, fair enough.
Of course they knew.
If they knew it, okay, that further confirms. If they knew it, then they would
he
be
was
shy.
handicapped.
Exactly.
Okay.
Shy would, anyway. Coming to Mr. Modi, I think he has been active and rightly so, and on all fronts. And he started, as you said, rightly with the neighborhood first, and did a very, I think, reasonably constructive initiative by calling all of them. Now, the failure, there are several. Firstly, we have not really assessed what the capacity and the mood in the neighboring countries is to respond to some of those initiatives which we are following. Secondly, on Pakistan front,
it may be a little too early also to judge.
Maybe, but there are factors, there are indicators which are very there. The change from, say, look east to act east.
Right.
It makes good noise, but in terms of substance, one has to assess as to what substantially is the change. In terms of great powers, I would want to underline one nuance, which I see, maybe right, maybe not. The nuance is that in the overall global strategic context, we seem to have leaned a little more towards the US and a little away from China. There are no scales to measure it, but this is the impression which I get, which would send all kind of other signals in one form or the other.
In fact, the visit of Russian president the other day, in fact, before his visit, this was what was being discussed, whether there was a slowing down of relationship with Russia vis-a-vis our leaning more towards the US. You think that the Russian president's visit has brought back the balance to some extent?
Hopefully, yes. Particularly the very sensitive Crimean issue, particularly in terms of signing of the agreements on. Some of the major agreements have yet to be signed on arms and civil nuclear issue. Trade still remains very lethargic.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be changing it. So yes, in a way, there are signs of balance, but the shift towards between US and China, I was not bringing in the Russians there, but between and China, there are very, very clear, I mean, if you have time, I can go into details.
No,
very clear indications that the shift has taken place.
Professor Pasha, one of the things which is being said is, post May 2014, after the new government has come in, non-alignment has had its problems in the past, but as Professor Muni is pointing out, there has been quite a marked shift, and this has resulted in some problems for certain countries. Would you say that in West Asia especially, how is West Asia looking at India now?
Well, as far as West Asia is concerned, as I said, we have been able to successfully maintain balance between the Arabs, Israelis, Turks, and the Iranians. And I think that is a well thought out policy, because we have interest in all of these areas, especially given the turmoil in the Gulf region. We had to make very good balance between the Arabs and the Iranians because of the sectarian nature of the conflicts which are escalating from Iran to Yemen to Hezbollah to Syria. We have not unnecessarily got involved in any of these local conflicts, which are aggravated by external powers, whether it is the United States or Russia supporting the Syrian regime. But the early indications of this government's policy is that they would like to pursue a close relationship with the Israelis. The Prime Minister having met Netanyahu on the sidelines at New York, and then Home Minister Rajnath Singh visited Israel, and the Israeli National Security Advisor was here. This has been balanced by the Omani Foreign Minister coming here. He was one of the first from this region to come here. Then Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj went to UAE, the largest trading partner in the Gulf region. And there are reports that Prime Minister may visit Turkey also in the very near future. So you have a sort of a balance being maintained.
What about this government? When it came into power, within the first month they had a problem about Gaza, and the way it was handled. You think that initial problem in handling the Gaza issue has now been balanced?
No, it was not handled, it was mishandled. In fact, in the parliament, that avoidable scene of not allowing discussion, I think, was entirely unnecessary. It gave a wrong message. But the governments there have got the clue that this government will have the closest of relations with Israel, and at the same time trying to maintain balance with the Arabs, the Iranians, and the Turks. So there's no doubt in the minds of these governments, given the earlier NDA government, which also was attracted towards Israel when Moshe Dayan visited, but Vajpayee had to maintain a balance among all the 3-4 parties in this region, because we have very close economic, political, diplomatic and strategic interests, which have actually accelerated over a period of time.
Okay.
In fact, the region is now the largest trading partner with over $200 billion of trade.
Okay. Siddarth, the shift in balance of India, is this something which is a very conscious move which is happening, or you think that it has just happened on its own?
No, I think given the
what Professor
orientation, no, I think Professor Muni is right in observing this. It's very clear the signaling and statements that have happened during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Japan, for example. The use of the phrase Vistarvad in Hindi, which is translated as expansionism in English, has sent certain signals.
Vietnam.
Well, Vietnam, India has always cultivated very close ties, and I would say the language that emerged in the joint statement with the Vietnamese and by the president was rather more restrained than what emerged in the India-Japan context. But I think that there is clearly an attempt being made by the US and its allies to aggressively woo India. And you see this by the US, of course, by Japan, by Australia. And we have seen in Mr. Modi's visit to Canberra and to Tokyo and to DC, of course, a certain willingness to reciprocate and to meet the US and Japan and Australia more than halfway.
Right.
This is bound to have an impact on India-China relations. We're seeing some reflections of that in our neighborhood, for example. But I want to, if I may, just come back to the neighborhood issue for a second. I think that, Prime Minister Modi began very well. But, for example, the invitation, the visit to Bhutan, the visit to Nepal, I would say somewhere down the line, this government has lost its way slightly. I think
as far as the neighbors are concerned,
I think on Pakistan, the manner in which talks were called off is bereft of logic, quite frankly, and I think it was mishandled. I'm not saying that there should not be a change of policy and that if you don't want Pakistan to talk to the Hurriyat, that's fine as a policy, but there's a way to handle this.
Right.
I think it was mishandled. I think in Nepal,
some kind of a knee-jerk reaction.
I think the Prime Minister's second visit to Nepal has certainly the degree of warmth that we saw during the first visit was clearly not present this time. On Bangladesh, he's made an important statement when he has reversed the BJP's position on the land boundary agreement and said that he is committed to implementing it. But if he balks in the future, if he's unable to deliver on that promise, I think that will create complications with Bangladesh.
Right.
And with Sri Lanka, you call, Gotabaya comes to Delhi and you then tell the press that we have said no more Chinese submarines. And then 2 days later, another Chinese submarine comes. So, the point is that you need to be careful in public pronouncements, public handling of neighbors. I think that the government hasn't found its feet as yet, and I think it's important to be cautious.
Mr. Katju, do you agree with that?
Look, I don't see any case of leaning one way or the other.
You don't see at all?
What I see is...
No, you don't see a leaning...
No. What I'm seeing is a clear signal to the Chinese, and appropriately, that India's sensitivities must be taken into account. That if India's sensitivities are disregarded by the Chinese...
It's a conscious signaling.
Yes, of course. And then the Chinese must also take care. Don't take us for granted. And that is a correct play in terms of international diplomacy, in my view. For example, you take the Russians. Despite all the overtures made, despite all the signals given by the West, including the United States, we haven't budged an inch on Crimea or on Ukraine. So that's proof enough that a fine line is being drawn. But China is a case apart. I think we've given them... On Pakistan, I beg to differ with Siddarth. I think what happened was absolutely appropriate. For far too long, we had given the Pakistanis a pass in terms of engagement with the Hurriyat.
Would you agree with what Siddarth says, that it could have been handled in a different manner?
Look,
not in a kind of a knee-jerk reaction it looked like.
No, look, as an ambassador, as someone who served as an ambassador, I know full well that even if 15 minutes before a dialogue, if the Foreign Office calls, you heed it. Everywhere and anywhere, that's normal diplomatic practice. So all this is much ado about nothing. And these things, the Pakistanis must understand. What have we said?
Okay.
We've said follow the normal norms of diplomatic interaction. Don't meet with separatists.
No, but what happens in the future will get hamstrung by what has happened in the past.
Look, are we really all that worried?
Are we not worried?
Should we be all that worried about Pakistan? Why this obsession with Pakistan? That we must talk to Pakistan as if the heavens will fall in terms of our foreign policy if we don't talk to Pakistan? So be it.
Professor Muni?
No, I would go along with Siddarth on this, that I agree with Vivek Katju that policy-wise there is nothing wrong. I have very strongly supported that Pakistan can no longer continue to talk to Hurriyat and dictate us or tell us
but
that
much has happened after the Hurriyat business.
This is the briefing of Kashmir. Okay. They don't have to tell us. Therefore, that channel had to be stopped. but it could have been done in a more nuanced manner rather than now. It's all right. Diplomatically, you can say 15 minutes earlier, but could we do it 15 days earlier?
Exactly.
We could have done it, and it should have been possible if this was our major concern. Now, secondly, Pakistan's implications in other areas must be seen.
Right.
For instance, at SARC, we got some of the major agreements which we wanted to push through for integration in the region have been blocked by Pakistan.
Yes.
And Pakistan has done it deliberately, yes. But it is a consequence. They are saying if you don't accept us on the table bilaterally, we will tell you or show you how you can proceed regionally. So yes, they are settling this course, but it is a consequence of a certain action which has taken place, which is, and coming back on China, I think, at no stage, for instance, the Buddhist conference and Dalai Lama is coming and is speaking, Dr. Manmohan Singh allowed it. The Chinese, thumb tables said so many things. Salman Khurshid on other issues of the Chinese thumping the table. We did not ignore it. So the Chinese knew that there are limits beyond which you can press India in one way or the other. But the most important aspect would be comparing two joint communiques, one with President Xi and the other with President Obama. With President Obama, for the first time, we referred to South China Sea. Right. There was no need. Yes, it is true that
what happened in Japan?
Yes, we could go along with Vietnam, no doubt about that. But there was no need for that to be repeated in the US, which was a very clear indication. Then the press statement in the presence of President Xi last time, that unless border issue is settled, economic development cannot proceed beyond a limit. That was a kind of a message which showed the shift, as I am saying. Right or wrong, we will have to watch and see. To some extent, it was to pressurize China that you better behave on border issues. If that happens, we will all hail Mr. Modi for this kind of a shift. If something else happens, we will have to sit down and look at it.
Yes, Professor Katju, what is your objection?
No, my point is simple. On South China Sea, there is a certain consensus within Asia, and we are following that. Also, the Chinese never show sensitivity when it comes to our neighborhood, and we should go all out of our way to ensure that their sensitivities are protected. I find this strange logic.
Siddarth, how do
you see, the thing is that if you're going to stick your neck out,
I'll give you a simple
comparison.
There is a lot of sticking of neck out happening.
I'll give you a simple comparison. We are willing to sit with Obama and issue a joint statement referring to South China Sea that gives comfort to countries that China has a dispute with, like Japan, for example. Would Abe-san and Obama be prepared, like when India and China had a standoff and you had Chinese troops that were squatting in Indian territory? Would the Japanese reciprocate that warm feeling? They will not, right? So I'm saying you need to be careful about, for example, it's one thing when President Mukherjee goes to Hanoi, which is in the region, and you issue a joint statement with the Vietnamese, which is the Indian Foreign Ministry line, that freedom of navigation in the high seas must be respected. It's a different matter when, as in Tokyo, the Prime Minister referred to countries that encroach on the seas of others. Until now, we've never said that South China Sea belongs to A or B. So when you use the word encroach on the sea of others, you're making a value judgment. So I think that, and that's something that the Prime Minister
and why refer in Indo-US joint statement?
No, I'm not quite persuaded that we must get reciprocity in a US-Japan joint statement.
Why not?
My interest is what is the signal that is going out to China.
So I'm telling you how great powers behave.
The great powers behave by also sending out particular signals without waiting for reciprocity.
But those signals also can be misread.
And also then we shouldn't crib. If in response to this, a Chinese Ambassador Sahab, if in response to this a Chinese submarine comes to Sri Lanka, right, then we shouldn't be beating up, pressing a hi, ab kya hua?
No, we are not.
Right? Please look at the national reaction.
No. I agree with you that in there we've got to handle it differently with the Sri Lankans. We have leverages which we should use.
Okay.
But that's a separate argument.
Professor Pasha, now we're running out of time. So you think that in these first 6 months there has been a lot of focus on Western nations, Western parts, and also on Look East policy. You think the Gulf and other areas have been to some extent neglected?
No.
Gulf and West Asia?
At the outset, I would like to mention that I largely agree with Siddarth as far as Pakistan is concerned.
Right.
You see, we could have handled our prickly neighbor in a much more sophisticated way instead of what Ambassador Katju has been advocating. Number two, as far as West Asia is concerned, you know, from this region, most of the leaders, presidents, prime ministers, amirs, sultans, kings have visited here. But Manmohan Singh could find time only to visit Saudi Arabia, Oman and Qatar. I mean, its importance need not be overemphasized, but, you know, as the areas expand, we need to engage at the highest level, as Prime Minister has been able to do at BRICS, at US and China, Japan, or Nepal, so on and so forth.
That will be the challenge
yes, that's
before
a major,
the government.
Challenge. Another point I would like to underline here is that, you know, as far as this personal diplomacy at the highest level has been so far successful, and that is needed, I think. Very important breakthrough from the earlier prime ministers. But we don't see the foreign minister also visiting with the prime minister. For the implementation part through the MEA, the foreign minister, also external affairs minister, has to be part and parcel of this entire...
Has to be seen with the prime minister.
No, not once do I recollect any foreign minister going with Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Okay.
This is unusual.
We are running out of time quickly.
Yes.
What are the challenges in the coming year?
The challenges is to implement all that that has been promised. You see, a stage, as I said...
What is the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge, I would imagine, would be in the neighborhood. And I think one country which hasn't been mentioned is Afghanistan. Absolutely. I know Siddarth mentioned that Dr. Manmohan Singh ran a successful policy. I think in the main it was good, but there were problem areas. There were certain sections of Afghan opinion that were neglected, and we are paying a price for it even today.
Okay.
So that is one area which requires far greater attention.
The major challenge of India's foreign policy is the delivery deficit. If Mr. Modi can bridge that, it would be great. Secondly, I think the mismatch between the political statement and political behavior of the ruling party and its implications for foreign policy, like particularly in the neighborhood, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Maldives, you know, the internal polarization issue will eventually affect adversely.
Okay.
And we have to take care of bridging this gap, if at all it is there.
Siddarth?
I would say the one area that I would like to see progress is in firmer institutional arrangements within India. You know, it's unclear right now the balance between PMO and MEA, the role that the Honorable External Affairs Minister will play or has been playing in the development and execution of foreign policy. Right now, it's been a very PMO-centric, Prime Minister-centric policy, which has a positive aspect because I think that it's definitely infused dynamism. But in terms of follow-through, in terms of interministerial coordination, it's essential that all branches of government get involved. And I think that I would look forward to some kind of recalibration where the MEA and the minister plays a more important role in this.
Just one
very quickly.
I think reform and restructuring of MEA and new institutions within MEA, like a formal committee of secretaries, is an urgent requirement.
This has been spoken about for a long time. Nothing has happened on that.
I've been advocating that.
Yes, Professor Pasha, very quickly, last word.
Yes, you see, as we have noticed in the previous areas, Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Gujarat and West Bengal and UP, Bihar also would like to play a role in the neighborhood policy. I think it would be prudent to involve these states also in the making of the neighborhood policy for successful implementation.
Prime Minister has spoken about it, involving the states, but we'll wait and watch. But it's evident that Prime Minister Modi has begun well as far as his foreign policy is concerned. We'll have to wait and watch, as all my panelists say, the deliverables, how much will be delivered, how much will be implemented, and we'll wait and watch. Thanks to all my guests, Vivek, Katju, Professor Muni, Siddarth, Varadarajan and Professor Pasha. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue of the year-ender very soon.